The Persian Gulf sits at the center of the world's most volatile standoff, and one man's decision will determine whether this region survives or burns. For decades, the United States and Iran have circled each other like two fighters too dangerous to touch. Each provocation carefully calculated, each response carefully measured. But something changed in 2025. The calculations stopped, the gloves came off, and the world held its breath as the most consequential confrontation of our era began to unfold. Donald Trump returned to the White House with a promise. He would not allow Iran to build a nuclear bomb. And unlike his predecessors, he meant every single word of it. Iran's leaders had heard such threats before. They had survived sanctions, assassinations, and cyber attacks. They believed, perhaps fatally, that America would always blink first. To understand what happened next, you must first understand what Iran truly is. Not just a nation, but a civilization 5,000 years old, shaped by pride, resilience, and revolutionary fire. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 was not merely a political event. It was a total transformation, a nation rejecting Western power and choosing its own dangerous, defiant path. America and Iran have not had formal diplomatic relations since that year. 46 years of silence, hostility, and near war, punctuated only by proxy battles and quiet negotiations. Every American president since Carter has tried to solve the Iran problem. None fully succeeded. It fell, finally, to Trump, the least conventional president in American history. His first term saw the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most powerful military commander. The region shook, but Tehran absorbed the blow and waited, as it always does. Iran's nuclear program became the central crisis of Trump's second term. Inspectors reported enrichment levels approaching weapons grade. The window for diplomacy was closing fast. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point through which 20% of the world's oil passes daily, became the physical embodiment of the standoff's terrifying stakes. Iran made its intentions clear. Any military strike would mean the strait would close. The global economy would convulse. No country would be left untouched by the consequences. Trump's advisors were divided. The hawks demanded action. The pragmatists warned of uncontrollable escalation. The intelligence community presented a single terrifying conclusion. Iran was 90 days from completing a deliverable nuclear device. 90 days. That intelligence assessment changed everything that happened from that moment forward. The president convened a classified National Security Council meeting. No leaks, no press. 7 hours of argument, analysis, and agonizing strategic calculation behind sealed doors. Trump emerged from that meeting a changed man. Those who were present later described his expression as something they had never seen before. Absolute, irreversible resolve. The military began moving, aircraft carriers repositioned, B-2 bombers quietly deployed to Diego Garcia, special operations teams inserted into forward positions across the region. Iran noticed. Iranian satellite systems tracked every repositioning, every deployment, every quiet transfer of munitions to bases ringing the Persian Gulf. They began to mobilize. The Houthis in Yemen activated anti-ship missiles. Hezbollah moved forces in Lebanon. Iraqi militia groups went on heightened alert. Iran's entire proxy network woke simultaneously. For 48 hours, the world teetered on an edge most civilians never knew existed. Markets sensed it before governments admitted it. Oil prices spiked 17% in a single session. The United Nations emergency session achieved nothing. Russia blocked every resolution. China abstained. The international community was, as it so often is, powerless to stop what was coming. Then Trump made his first move. Not military, not yet. He called Israel. The conversation lasted 37 minutes. What was agreed in those 37 minutes remains classified to this day. Within hours, Israeli F-35s conducted a mysterious overflight of western Iran. No weapons were dropped. But the message was received in Tehran with absolute clarity and cold fear. Iran's supreme leader gathered his commanders in an underground bunker beneath Tehran. The options before them were terrible, and every single one carried catastrophic risks for the nation. They chose provocation. 3 Iranian speedboat squadrons swarmed a British oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, boarding the crew and seizing the vessel in broad daylight. The world erupted. Britain demanded release. The U.S. Navy moved. For 6 hours, a British crew sat hostage while the most powerful military in history moved into strike range. Trump gave Iran a deadline: 12 hours. Release the crew, stand down enrichment activity, and accept inspectors at Fordow, or face consequences that cannot be walked back. Iran released the crew at hour 11. It seemed like a de-escalation. It was not. It was a tactical pause, a breath before the storm that everyone knew was still coming. Intelligence intercepts revealed Iran had used the 12 hours to accelerate centrifuge operations at Fordow, burying critical components deeper underground, racing against what they knew was inevitable. Trump was informed at 2 in the morning. He gave one order. He called his defense secretary, spoke for 8 minutes, and then hung up. The military began its final preparations. At 3:17 a.m. Eastern Time, American forces initiated Operation Silent Verdict. 12 B-2 stealth bombers crossed into Iranian airspace undetected, carrying the largest conventional bombs in the U.S. arsenal. Simultaneously, Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from 3 destroyers in the Persian Gulf. 62 missiles in the opening salvo, all targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure with surgical, devastating precision. Iran's air defenses, despite years of preparation, were overwhelmed. The strikes were too fast, too numerous, too well coordinated. The darkness was torn open by American firepower. Fordow, buried under 90 meters of solid granite mountain, had been considered by many experts to be unstrikeable. That assessment, as the world now discovered, was catastrophically wrong. Massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds, struck the mountain in pairs, the second bomb driving through the channel blasted by the first. Fordow ceased to exist. Natanz, Arak, Isfahan, each major facility was struck within the same 90-minute window. Iran's nuclear program, built over 20 years and at staggering cost, was erased in a single night. Tehran's streets erupted in wailing sirens. State television cut to emergency broadcasting. The supreme leader was moved to a third location. The government was in controlled chaos. Iran's military response came within the hour. Ballistic missiles launched toward U.S. bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. Most were intercepted by Patriot and THAAD batteries. 2 missiles broke through. One struck a warehouse at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. 14 American service members were injured. 3 lost their lives in the rubble. Trump addressed the nation at 6 a.m. His voice was steady, but his message was iron. He named the 3 fallen soldiers. He promised their sacrifice would not be without meaning. Iran launched a second wave, this time targeting Israel. Iron Dome performed magnificently, intercepting 91 of 94 incoming projectiles. 3 struck empty fields in the Negev. The world was watching. Financial markets went into freefall. Oil spiked 40% in 3 hours before circuit breakers halted trading on exchanges from New York to Tokyo. China's military moved a naval task force toward the Persian Gulf, stopping just outside the region, close enough to signal, far enough to avoid direct confrontation. Calculated pressure. Russia condemned the strikes in the harshest terms since the Cold War. Putin appeared on state television, face tight with controlled fury, calling the strikes a crime against sovereignty. But Iran's proxy network, expected to unleash simultaneous chaos, hesitated. Hezbollah did not launch. Iraqi militias stood down. The Houthis fired 2 missiles and then went silent. Intelligence analysts later concluded that Iran's proxies had received a back-channel message. This was contained. Do not widen the war. The regime's survival depends on restraint tonight. Inside Tehran's government, a power struggle erupted. Hardliners demanded total war. Pragmatists, led by figures in the Revolutionary Guard, quietly made the argument for a different path. The argument of the pragmatists was simple and brutal. Iran's nuclear program was gone. Continuing to fight would cost the regime everything, including the revolution itself. Stand down. On the third day, Iran's foreign minister contacted Qatari mediators. A message was passed, not a surrender, carefully worded to preserve dignity, but clearly indicating willingness to talk. Trump received the message during dinner at the White House. He read it, set it down, and said 4 words to his chief of staff: "Tell them we're listening." The talks happened in Doha over the following 9 days. No cameras, no press, no grandstanding, just exhausted diplomats working through the architecture of a genuinely historic agreement. Iran agreed to permanent cessation of nuclear weapons development, full IAEA access to all facilities, including sites previously hidden, and a formal end to proxy attacks on U.S. assets. In return, the United States agreed to lift the most crippling economic sanctions and provide a security guarantee, signed and witnessed, that regime change was not American policy. Trump called it the most important deal since the end of the Cold War. His critics called it a capitulation. History will take longer to render its final, definitive verdict. What is undeniable is that Iran's nuclear weapons program is gone. Whether it stays gone depends on verification, on political will, and on whether both sides mean what they signed. The 3 American soldiers who died at Al-Udeid were buried with full honors. Their families received personal calls from the president. Their names were inscribed in memory and history. Iranian civilians began the complicated process of absorbing what had happened. Many had privately hoped the nuclear program would end. Its enormous cost had come from their lives. Others mourned what they saw as a national humiliation, a sovereign nation's most ambitious project destroyed by foreign power in a single, overwhelming night of precision and fire. The global economy took 6 weeks to stabilize. Oil prices normalized. The Strait of Hormuz, which had briefly narrowed with military presence, reopened fully to international shipping. China quietly withdrew its naval task force. Russia's condemnations faded from the headlines. The world moved on, as it always does, to its next crisis, its next precipice. But in Washington, a debate raged that will not fade so quickly. Was this the right decision? Were there other paths? What did the use of military force truly cost the United States? Military scholars noted that Operation Silent Verdict was the most precise, most strategically targeted strike in the history of aerial warfare. Not a single civilian infrastructure site was hit. Human rights organizations raised their own accounting. Iranian casualties at the nuclear sites included scientists, engineers, and military personnel. The precise number remains disputed and contested. The precedent set is perhaps the most consequential legacy, that the United States will, under certain conditions, conduct unilateral preemptive strikes against nuclear programs it deems threatening. North Korea watched closely. So did Saudi Arabia, which has quietly accelerated its own nuclear energy discussions. The architecture of global non-proliferation shifted in ways not yet fully understood. Israel exhaled. For decades, Iranian nuclear capability had been treated as an existential threat. That threat, at least in its current form, is neutralized. For now, for this moment. Trump's approval rating surged to its highest point. His base celebrated. Military families expressed pride alongside grief. Internationally, the reaction was far more complicated and divided. European allies who were not consulted before the strikes expressed fury privately, even as they acknowledged relief that the nuclear program was gone. The alliance's wounds will take time. Trump held one more press conference before the dust truly settled. He stood at the podium, American flags behind him, and delivered a statement of unusual brevity and quiet confidence. He said 3 things. America does not seek war. America will not accept nuclear threats to its allies. And America keeps its promises, to its enemies as much as to its friends. Whether those words mark the end of the crisis or merely its first chapter remains the great open question of our time. The Middle East has never made permanence easy to achieve. History has a long memory in that region. The Persian civilization remembers empires that came and went. The Islamic Republic has survived things that should have destroyed it before. What Trump's final move accomplished, above all else, is time. Time for Iran to make different choices. Time for the international community to build stronger verification frameworks. Time for a new generation of Iranians, young, educated, desperate for a different future, to shape what their country becomes next. That is the true prize of this moment. The Persian Gulf glitters at sunrise now, calmer than it has been in years. Tankers move freely, markets breathe, diplomats meet. The language of catastrophe, briefly, falls quiet. But history teaches us that in this region, quiet is never permanent. The roots of conflict run deep, deeper than any single strike, deeper than any single agreement, any single president. What we witnessed was not the end of the story between America and Iran. It was the closing of one chapter, perhaps the most dangerous chapter, and the beginning of something uncertain. Uncertain, but not hopeless. And in a region where hope has so often been the first casualty, not hopeless is, perhaps, enough to begin with. Perhaps it is everything. The final move in any great geopolitical confrontation is never truly final. But Donald Trump made his move, and the world, for better or worse, will never be quite the same.